do it so you can see a little bit better.
And anyone online, you're welcome to chime in. You can just unmute and ask questions. He is the best person to answer any questions you have in the mortgage world. So make sure you are taking note. Okay.
Thank you. Happy belated 4th, everyone. Glad that you all are here. Because this is an important topic. This is something that you guys are facing every day. And you're probably having a lot of obstacles or objections right now that I don't want to buy because rates are too high. I don't want to buy because like prices are too high and I can't afford it. Are probably the two biggest ones that you're seeing right now. We want to be able to overcome those obstacles with data, with information, take the emotion out of it. And emotion is always part of every home purchase, but you need to have some tools in your arsenal to be able to answer questions and to tell people why waiting. And we're going to go through that, why waiting is not a good idea. And why that's going to be counterproductive to what they think will happen by waiting. They think what's going to happen by waiting. Hey, why waiting is I'm going to be able to get a lower price, lower rate, and a lower payment. And some of those things may be true, but the overall benefit's going to actually be counterproductive by waiting. We're going to talk about that. So as he said, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. We're at Inspiro Financial. We're here to help you. We want to work with you as much as we can. That's why we're here. That's why we share an office space downstairs on the 1st floor with Everest, as to help you all. So what we're going to do today is go over some of this stuff. And as we go through it, ask any questions that you might have. I'll come over here so you can see me. If I'm standing funny, I got up about 10 minutes ago out of my chair, my back got all weird. So if you see me moving weird, that's why I'm trying to get limber. I may have to sit down every once in a while. But I'm not putting any bias into the things I'm going to talk about today. We're going to go over about 15 slides of data. Okay. Data slides over the financial markets of what's happening that will tell you and paint a picture for you why now is the time to buy, why you should not be waiting. So this isn't me telling you that you should tell your clients to buy. This is the financial data that's telling you why you should tell your clients to buy now and not wait. Okay. And this is the stuff that you see stuff on TV all the time. CSNBC, CNN, Fox News, these talking heads, and they're constantly spewing predictions or what they think is going to happen or what's happening. And it's a bunch of nonsense. And your job as a realtor is to kind of clear that stuff out with your clients because they're hearing it on the radio. They're reading it on TV, online. They're hearing about it on TV, and most of the time that's just clickbait, just ways to get people to tune into their channel. It's not the real data. It's not the important stuff. But you've got to be able to weed that stuff out. So as they have these little birds chirping in the air about what's happening in the market, you can set them straight and let them know what really is going on. So that's what we're going to go through today. We're going to go through a bunch of slides with data. So some of this is a little bit analytical, but you got to bear with me as we go through it so you can get this overall picture as to why there's this false narrative out there, why we should be waiting to buy and why really now is the time to do that. Okay, so this is a graph from the FRED. The FRED is the Federal Reserve Economic Data Group. The Federal Reserve is in charge of all monetary policy, the banking system in the United States. They're an independent organization. You know the Fed, you hear them all the time. The Fed, they raise rates, they do all kinds of stuff. That's what everyone follows. And they have hundreds of millions of pieces of data all about the economy. Okay, so most of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing with you today comes from FRED, the Fed, which is called FRED. And so they're just giving data. Data is data. Data doesn't lie, right? There's no emotion, there's no feelings in it. It is what it is. Okay, so that's what you're going to see today. Is most of the stuff's coming from the FRED.
Christopher, will you say what that means again?
Federal Reserve Economic Data. Federal Reserve Economic Data. And this is about as, can you see, it's not super clear, but I think it's about as clear as this gets. You can see, but this shows what interest rates have done really the last 50 years, okay? Right now, we're at about 7% on a traditional 30-year fixed mortgage, conventional mortgage. So let's look historically about what rates have been. Prior to about 2000, rates were consistently almost always well above 7%. And if we were to extrapolate this out even further, back into the 50s, 60s, 40s, you'd still see it in this range, 7 to 10%. Okay. My first home that I bought at 10.5%. Some of you may have done the same. We've just been super, super spoiled since the year 2000 of this constantly decreasing interest rate environment. That's to the point where a lot of millennials have never even heard of a rate over 7%. Right, their heads explode. We're going to talk about why that's important. But historically speaking, a 7% rate is a great interest rate. So that's narrative number one. We got to get this out of people's mind that 7% is a high rate. Is it high compared to what it was a year or 2 years ago when it was half that? Yeah, but these were all-time historic lows as a result of a pandemic. These gray bars talk about recessions or big events that happened financially that was negative to the economy. So here's the big housing recession that we talk about from 2008 to 2010. Here's a little COVID recession that we had a little bit. And rates were down here in the 2s and 3s, that's the lowest they've ever been in 250-year history of the United States. We've never seen that. We're not going to see that again. Okay, we got to get that out of our mind. But the problem is so much activity happened here. This is the rate that is the baseline for a lot of people, 3-4%. They don't realize the 7% rate is a great rate. Okay, historically speaking. So number one, we got to get that narrative out there with our clients. Hey, 7% still a good rate. Yeah, it's not what it was a year or two ago, but historically it's still a good rate. And that's going to be the new normal for a while. We got to get used to that. All right, let's look at mortgage originations over the last 20 years, kind of what they have been doing, because this paints a picture of why purchase business is going to be booming here. The orange line represents refinance volumes every year. The blue line represents purchase volume every year. You can kind of see it's been kind of consistent. Here's COVID years. These were record refinance years. We've never had so many refinances ever. Let's look at the blue line, how it's been consistently increasing. Big years during COVID, still kind of big. It's dipped a little bit this year, but look at the projections the next couple of years, right? Bigger than any year we've had in the last 20 years. A purchase environment is coming, an amazing purchase environment, one that we've never seen before, bigger than that's going to crush this in the coming years. And we're going to tell you why that's the case and why you need to prepare for it. And again, because of that, why now is the time to buy and not waiting a year or two to do it, because the things that are going to be impacted by that huge amount of demand that happens. So this is again from the Fed and from the NBA about how much you can see refinance markets virtually zero, but huge purchase years coming up. And this is all based on economic data that's going to be happening. We're going to talk about that. Any questions about the slide? Okay. This is a lot of numbers. I'm just going to focus on the red line numbers. This is talking about kind of mortgage interest rates and purchase volume. Okay, from 2022. Last year, rates ended at about 6.5%. We did about 1.5 trillion in mortgage volume. This year, it's down. This is the rate that we'd hoped it would be at the beginning of the year. We thought rates might come down by the end of the year. That's probably not going to be the case. It's probably going to be closer to where they are now. We're not going to see much difference. But we know in the coming years, based on economic data, rates are guaranteed coming down sometime over the next 12 to 24 months. They're going to. We'll show you why. It just always happens based on what happens with the Fed and with the economy. So we know rates are going to improve and get better. And these volumes, these more origination volumes, I don't know if you can see the number, 1.4 trillion this year, but 1.6 trillion next year, 1.7 trillion the year after. And that's numbers getting better over the next 5 years. Historic levels of purchase volume is coming. And it's not just because home prices are high and they're going to remain high. It's because there's this massive, incredible pent up demand that's just waiting to burst, a dam that's waiting to burst. You need to be prepared for. Okay. All right, so this talks about the Fed funds rate. Any of you know what the Fed funds rate is? This is important to understand. The Fed funds rate, again, is the Federal Reserve. This is the rate that you always see on TV when they say, hey, the Fed increased rates 0.25%, which they've done over the last year and a half. Every quarter, they've raised it 0.25%. They did this last time for the first time in a year and a half. It's the highest increase we've ever seen the Fed funds rate in such a short amount of time ever. But this shows what the Fed funds rate has been historically, again, over the last 60, 70 years. Again, these gray lines indicate recessions, okay? The Fed always, when the Fed increases the Fed funds rate, there's always a recession that follows. Can you see that? The Fed increases, then there's a recession and they drop the Fed funds rate. Historically, that's always been the case. So if we come here, leading up to the pandemic, right? We had the pandemic and they pretty much put the Fed funds rate at 0, which is why we had this money was flowing freely. They were pumping all kinds of money into the economy to avoid a recession. And they did that by lowering the Fed funds rate, making it really cheap to borrow, right? For companies and businesses to borrow money, and it impacted mortgage rates. That's why we had the lowest rates in history. And they've been kind of steady the last few years. Well, the last year and a half, you can see what the Fed has done. This is the steepest incline that we've ever seen in the Fed funds rate. The Fed funds rate is the rate that banks lend to one another when they need to borrow a loan overnight, when they need to balance their books. And that rate directly impacts all the rates you see with your savings account, with car loans, with CDs, with student loans, with credit cards. All short-term interest rates are directly impacted by the Fed funds rate. If you have a home equity line of credit on your house, which is a variable interest rate, it's tied to the Fed funds rate or the prime rate. And as that rate goes up, your mortgage rate goes up if you have an adjustable rate on a home equity line of credit, which a lot of people do. So you can see this massive steep increase in the Fed funds rate. Well, what always happens for the last 100 years when the Fed increases the Fed funds rate drastically over a short period of time? What happens after that? It will decline. It is naturally going to decline. Now, why does the Fed, which controls the banking system and monetary policy, why are they driving the Fed funds rate up? What are they trying to do? What's the big word we've been hearing the last year and a half with inflation? Inflation. We're trying to lower inflation, right? The cost of goods and services are going through the roof. So if you make it more expensive for cost of goods and services, if you make it more expensive for companies, all companies borrow money to live, right? In the short term, they pay them off, but to hire people, to build buildings, to build manufacturing plants, to buy more trucks to ship. Amazon's got to buy more planes so they can get it up to you in a day, right? They don't pay cash for those things. They're borrowing money to do that. If you make it more expensive for a company to borrow money, they're going to slow their business and their production down because they don't want to pay for it. Does that make sense? They're going to slow it down if money costs a lot. And so by increasing the Fed funds rate, everything gets more expensive and the economy by nature just slows down. It just slows down. The economy was going crazy during COVID because money was basically free. It didn't cost anything to borrow money. Interest rates were basically free. So everyone was borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and building and borrowing, expanding. When it costs money, they slow things down. That's the point of the Fed. The Federal Reserve primary role is, number one, to keep unemployment below 5%. Right, that's one of their number one jobs. Well, unemployment has been below 5% for like 7-8 years. We're not even close to 5%. We're in the 3s. The second goal is to make sure that inflation is right around 2%. Well, inflation was approaching 10% as we came through here, which is why you had this drastic increase. They said, we got to pump the brakes on this thing because if we don't, prices are going to get out of control. And that's their biggest dilemma right now is we want to slow inflation. And it's been working, right? The inflation is becoming now under control, 8%. 7%, 6%, sub 6%. It's approaching their 2% goal, but it's not down to 2%. And so they're keeping this Fed funds rate higher until inflation gets under control. Why they're not also changing it is because the employment market is still going crazy. I mean, there's unemployment in Utah sub 3%. There are tons of jobs to be had, which means that in the Fed's mind, even though the rates are going up to borrow money for businesses, it's not impacting companies because they're still hiring people, right? If companies are being impacted by higher rates, they will stop hiring people. We can't hire any more people. We got to slow down production. We don't need any more. That hasn't been the case. And you view that by how many people are filing for unemployment. So every quarter, there's a number called the unemployment rate, and it comes out, it says how many people filed for unemployment during the last quarter. And typically it's been under 250,000 people in the entire United States. So the Federal Reserve said, that's great. That's hardly anything for a population of 330 million people. That's a super low unemployment rate for that quarter of people that have filed for unemployment. So that means that this is working. Inflation's coming down. Businesses aren't being impacted because people aren't filing for unemployment. So we're going to keep this policy. We're just going to keep the Fed funds rate artificially inflated high because it's higher than it should be. The only time the Fed's going to really change this and start lowering the Fed funds rate is if they start to see unemployment numbers come in at about 300 to 350,000 plus for a quarter. We need to see that. I mean, it sounds terrible, but we need to see unemployment claims come in at 350,000 plus. So the Fed says, uh-oh, our Fed funds rate is now having a negative impact on the economy. We need to either maintain or lower the Fed funds rates, which will help interest rates. Does that make sense? What the Fed's primary objective is. So again, this is not us, me, anyone saying what's going to happen, but we can always see that after a recession, the Fed fund rate drops, and the Fed wants a recession. Now, a recession means that the GDP, how much we produce as a country, is below 0% for at least a quarter, meaning we're making less than what we spend. If that makes sense, right? You're not living a balanced budget to some degree from a financial standpoint. That means a recession, but the word recession is kind of scary, but it could be $1 below the line and it's considered a recession. They want to see a recession. They want to see the economy slow down to curb inflation. So they're just driving for a mini recession to get inflation under control so they can lower interest rates. That's all they're trying to do. And the economy is so strong, it's fighting back and saying, no, we don't want a recession. We're growing. You know, we like this. And so you have this battle, this conflict that's going on, which is why this is dragging on a little bit longer than we'd hoped. So you can know that there's a good chance that rates are going to come down by two things happening. Either the Fed really fast raises rates a bunch in a short amount of time, meaning instead of raising it 0.25%, they raise it 0.5 to 1% over a few months because they're like, okay, we're tired of this. The Fed funds rate, by the way, is at 5.25%. We're going to take it at 5.25 to 7% really quick. That's going to for sure put us into recession really fast. And if we're in a recession, mortgage rates will come down for sure. Or if you see them saying, we're just going to stay at status quo and we're not going to do anything, that's also a good sign, but it's going to take longer than for rates to come down when they do that, because it's going to take longer for us to kind of hit recession rate type numbers. So you can kind of look and forecast and just monitor what's happening by what the Fed is doing every quarter. If the Fed is maintaining pretty much status quo, okay, rates are going to stay status quo and maybe a little longer before we see rates drop. Or if they raise the Fed funds rate even more drastically, bad for the economy, it's going to cause a recession, but bad things in the economy, it means good things for mortgage rates. It's kind of weird, but if the economy, the stock market's not doing well, that's great for mortgage rates. Rates come down. So wait for you to kind of keep track of that. Any questions about this? Okay. Again, we're building a picture. We're building a picture as to why you need to tell people. You're not going to go into this much detail, but you need to understand from a high level why people should not be waiting. We're going to talk about, again, more into that, the reason. Here we go. Okay, so this is a graph that shows the difference between a 30-year fixed mortgage rate, which is the blue line, and the 10-year bond loan. The 10-year bond loan is, you know, you can give the government money and they give you an interest rate of return over 10 years. It's called a bond. It's like investing in it's like you're giving the government a loan and they're going to pay you back a certain percent interest rate over the course of 10 years. It's called a 10-year bond. It's guaranteed. Government's never not paid. It's a guaranteed return. And the 10-year treasury bond and mortgage rates, you can see, go hand in hand, almost parallel for over 50 years, right? As the treasury, 10-year treasury goes up and down, the bond kind of goes up and down with it. They kind of mirror each other like this living thing, this symbiotic relationship they have with each other. Again, you can see these recessionary periods, and that's been the case for 50 years. So one of the key indicators you can watch to see if mortgage rates are going to go up and down is just to follow the 10-year treasury bond. And you can Google it. It's on every financial page on the internet. And as that thing goes up and down, you have an idea whether mortgage rates are going to follow suit. Okay. And typically this relationship, let me zoom in a little bit closer. Typically this relationship, this is over the last 6 or 7 years, 9 years, there's about a 1.5% to 2% spread. Okay. So if the 10-year treasury is at 4%, mortgage rate should be 5.5% to 6%. Does that make sense? There's a 1.5% to 2% interest rate spread from the 10-year note to mortgage loans. So if the 10-year note's at 3%, what should the mortgage rates be at? 4.5% to 5%. So 1.5% to 2% spread. So whatever the 10-year treasury's mortgage rates should be 1.5% to 2% above that. And that's historically always been the case until now. Okay. Right now, the spread is over 3%. We call it 300 basis points. So right now, the 10-year treasury, as I said, was at 3.8% as of today or yesterday, the 10-year treasury. So based on a historical model, 1.5% above that is 5.3%. So interest rate should be between 5.3% and 5.8%. What they should be historically based off what they owe, this symbiotic relationship. But what are rates today? 7. Okay. They're 1% to 1.5% higher than they should be. They are artificially inflated because the Fed is playing with this funny Fed funds rate game. So they're higher. Why are they higher? They're higher because everybody knows about this game. Everybody knows that the Fed plays with rates and eventually they'll come back down. Okay. So if I'm an investor in mortgage-backed securities, which are mortgage loans, every mortgage loan that we do that you close for a client, it's a financial piece of paper that you can buy and sell on Wall Street. It's a loan, but it's a piece of paper that gets sold on Wall Street with big investors, governments, hedge funds, insurance companies that have trillions of dollars. They buy mortgage-backed securities as an investment tool, just like a stock, because it's very secure, because people make their house payments. People don't want to lose their house. So it's a very secure investment with a decent return. Well, when I buy a mortgage-backed security, it takes me usually about 3 years to recoup the cost of buying it, because I have to pay a premium for it. So on a $100,000 loan that I buy, I'm going to probably spend $101,000 to get it. It's an investment. It's going to take me about 3 years to recoup that cost before I start making money. And you buy these in $100 million tranches as from investment companies. So if I'm a mortgage-backed security buyer, which is governments and big hedge funds, and I know the mortgage rates are going to come down for sure in the next 12 to 24 months. If I buy a pool of mortgage loans today at 7%, it's a nice return, but it takes me 3 years to recoup that cost. What's going to happen with all those mortgage loans are at 7% in a year or two, and now rates are at 5.5% or 5%? What are those people going to do? They're going to refinance. And so now I'm a mortgage-backed security holder. I've got this great pool of loans at 7%, but it takes me 3 years to recoup it. And everyone refinances in a year and a half or 2 years. I just lost my shorts, right? Because I didn't recoup my money. And so the mortgage-backed securities market doesn't want to buy. They're so concerned about repayment, people paying off their mortgages quicker, because everyone that's gotten a loan over the last year and a half and everyone that's going to get a loan over the next year and a half is going to refinance again. Guaranteed, the second rates drop. You would. If you're at 7% and rates are 5.5%, you're going to refinance, right? And everyone that's gotten a mortgage loan the last year has been at a close to 6.5–7% rate. They're all going to refinance. So if I'm a purchaser of mortgage loans, I know that the data tells me that, the historical record tells me that. And so in order for me to actually invest in that mortgage loan, I need to get a higher rate of return to make back my money, not in 3 years, but maybe a year and a half. So therefore, that's why mortgage rates are inflated by over 1 to 1.5%, because the end investor, they're demanding that to make money flow. Otherwise, we don't have loans. That makes sense? How this is all working together? Okay. So mortgage rates are artificially inflated right now, 1 to 1.5%. They should be in the mid 5s. They're in the 7s because of what's happening with the Fed funds rate, and because investors know that everyone's going to refinance when rates drop, and they will drop. Okay. Now, still doesn't mean people should wait. We're going to talk about they should not be waiting. Sorry, I have my glasses on. This is the median home sales prices of homes across the United States, not Utah, but across the United States. Median meaning half are above this line, half are below this line. Not the average, but the median. Half above this line, half below. You know, right now the average median home price is approaching 500,000. You know, look back in the mid 60s, it was like 10,000. Okay. 20 years ago, it was around 200,000. It's more than doubled in the last 20 years. You know, home prices continue to this massive increase the last few years. Home prices continue to rise. What's happened in Utah the last 12 months with home prices? Have they remained steady, flat, gone down? Gone down a tad. I mean, 10%. Some markets as a state, it's about 5%. Some markets maybe 10. Some markets have gone up. Depends on where you're buying. Holiday, West Valley, Curtis, Mill Creek. I mean, it's different. Every community is different. We're very unique that way. Well, most markets are that way, but it's such a small geographical area. Home prices fluctuate pretty tremendously. But as a state, it's about 5.6%. They've gone down, which is pretty negligible. When you consider the last few years, rates they went up 16, 18, 19, 20% in some areas. It's pretty flat. As you know, buying a house is the best investment you can. It's going to, over the last since 60 years, this line, yeah, there's some dips, but this is the trend, right? It's upward, 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 upward. That's not going to change so much. We're going to tell you why. People are saying, oh no, we're going to see a big housing drop. No, we're not. And I'm going to show you why. We are not going to see a big housing drop in prices. That's not going to happen. In fact, we could see another double-digit increase here in the next 12 to 24 months. One reason why supply. The biggest reason we all know is supply versus demand. Okay, we do not have enough homes to sell. We do not have enough homes to rent. This has been an issue for the last 15 years. It's gotten progressively worse. Right now, this is a graph that shows the percentage of all homes that are vacant or for sale or for rent. Okay, that would be available for sale or for rent. Okay, what the vacancy percentage is. And it's, 2%. I mean, it's virtually nothing. Right now, we have a shortage of about $1.5 million homes per year in the United States that need to be built based on demand. Meaning every year, we are building $1.5 million, not dollars, 1.5 million fewer homes than we need to meet the demand. Every year, 1.7 million new homes are created. A new home is just two people living together, a new household, I should say. It's two people living together, whether they're married or not, doesn't matter how many kids they have, but two people that live together and now need a place to live. That makes sense? So you and I start living together, we need a place to live, that's a new household. Every year, 1.7 million new households are created in the United States, and we're only building for 1.5 million new households. Now, that doesn't include all the people that are wanting to buy and sell and upgrade. This is just new household creations. Right now, we're 6.5 million household creations short supply of homes in the United States, 6.5 million. In Utah, it's tens of thousands. We're short every year. That it's just not meeting the demand, right? We are short every year on rentals and homes being built. Well, when you have this massive pent up demand and a short supply, what does that do to everything? Everything goes up. Rent goes through the roof. Prices go through the roof. Doesn't matter anything else that's happening. I don't care what interest rates are doing. I don't care what the economy is doing. People need a place to live. Can't live in a tent. Well, some people do, but I can't live in a tent, right? I don't want to live in a tent. I want to live in a place, 4 walls and a roof. And we just don't have it. And it's been an issue for a long time. We're trying to catch up. Now, here's a more drastic graph of how many homes are for sale. Let's look back. This is in millions. This is 2.5 million. This is 1 million. This is 4 million. At the height of the great housing recession, we had 4 million homes for sale, but historically we had about 2.5 million homes for sale. We have 1 million home for sales right now in the United States. Okay. Massive, and it's not getting better, right? You can see it's up and down, but it's this downward trend. They're just not building homes fast enough. It's more expensive for materials. Home builders, they want to keep prices high, so they're not like scrambling to build more, right? Your Ivory Homes, boy, my average house sales price is $650. If I build another 1,000 homes, my average home price may be $550. I don't want to do that. I want to keep prices high, so I'm going to kind of slow down. There's no incentive for them to build, right? These are things that we're talking about on Washington. How can we get this number to go back up? Because we need this number to go back up, particularly for first-time home buyers who are being hurt the most by what's happening out there. First-time home buyers, which kind of drive the move up people, right? First-time home buyers come in and you move up houses over time. So demand is huge, and supply is at all-time lows.
Does those figures include like high density housing, like apartments,
Yeah.
condominiums?
This is just homes for sale. This
Homes
is
for sale.
condos, any kind of property for sale. This doesn't include rentals. Yeah, multifamily, condos, townhomes, any kind of home for sale that
Not
you can buy. Apartments, you rent, but in New York, you buy apartments, but so any home, any type of dwelling you can buy, whatever that is, whatever you can purchase, not rent. Okay, so 1 million homes for a population of 3 to 30 million is not enough. I mean, we had 2.5 million 40 years ago when our population was 200 million, right? So much more supply in relationship to the population. So this is going down while our population is going up. Again, prices are not going to drop. I don't care what rates are doing, prices are not going to drop. Here's inventory that's very recent through just a month ago, a weekly inventory, new listings, or not new listings, but new inventory. You kind of see it kind of goes up and down over the last few years, and how it's really dropped. Why do you think, what happened here? These years, what was the big event here? COVID, biggest refi purchase years ever, okay? Everyone has, 90%, 92% of the population right now that has a mortgage has a rate below 6%. If you have a mortgage right now, 92% of all mortgages are below 6%. 70% of all mortgage loans are below 5%, and 60% of all mortgage loans are below 3.5%. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to list my house right now because I got a 3.5% rate, and rates that are 7%, they're twice as high. Why would I want to do that? We need to tell people why they want to do that. We'll show them why they still want to do that as the move up buyer. But this is why everyone refinanced, bought here, and our inventory is sluggishly on a weekly basis, not really going anywhere. New listings, same thing. This is the last couple of years. Black line is this year. These are the last 2 years. We're well below the weekly new listings every week this year from what it has been in the past. Typically, This is when we peak in the summer. We're not seeing that. You're seeing a decline and a flattening rather than it's like half the number of new listings that are being put on the market every week. Okay. Bankruptcies and foreclosures. Why am I showing you this? Bankruptcies and foreclosures leads to inventory, right? People that file bankruptcy or foreclose on the home. Typically, there are millions of homes that happens to every year that now it's a new house for someone to buy. That's not happening. Let's look back here and these are 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Here's the housing recessions when we had massive foreclosures and bankruptcies, and it kind of stayed high for a few years and it's gotten better and better and better to where now, you look right now, there's virtually no bankruptcies and foreclosures. Foreclosures are this little gray line. You can barely see it. It's virtually non-existent. There's just hardly any foreclosures happening right now. And bankruptcies have kind of leveled off to historical levels. The bankruptcy laws changed kind of right around here, making it much harder to, well, actually they changed right here to file bankruptcy. So that's why you're seeing there's this massive spike and everyone tried to file bankruptcy before the laws changed. And now you're just not seeing very many bankruptcies happening. Okay. So we're not seeing millions of homes come on the market every year from foreclosures and bankruptcies. People they're keeping their houses. Why are they keeping their houses? This has to do with credit profile. Who are the type of people that are buying houses? Back here, here's the housing recession when everything kind of, people thought it was a new depression, housing recession. Something happened right here in 2010, a new lending law called qualified mortgages. Okay, qualified mortgages, meaning you have to qualify to get a mortgage now. We have to verify who you are, your social security number, your credit report, your scores have to be decent. We have to verify your income. We have to verify your job. We have to verify your assets. We have to verify everything for a borrower 2 and 3 times. So people are qualified. We have to verify you can make the payment based on your debt ratio, that you're a qualified borrower. Prior to this, right? Okay. The 10 years leading up to this, there were no rules, right? If you had a name and a pulse, I could get you a loan, right? How much money do you make? Great. I accept it. I'm not going to verify it. I want to buy a $500,000 house, borrower. You need to make $12,000 a month to make this payment. Do you make $12,000 a month? Yes, I do. Okay, good enough for me. I don't have to verify it. I can just take your word for it. Call them liar loans, right? But the federal government was pushing home ownership, and we're promoting these type of loans where we didn't have to verify anything. And you have these stories of, the guy out here blowing the blower, right? Owns 10 houses because he says he makes 20 grand a month and no one's verifying it. And then what happens when the piper comes due? You have this huge housing crash. So because of that, the federal government, which they always do, they overstep, they overreach when things happen, and they develop what are called qualified mortgages. So everyone's qualifying now. You don't find people buying houses that do not qualify. We can't get you a loan if you don't qualify. So as a result, and people have been taught more, oops, I'm going the wrong way. People have been taught more and more about credit. People's credit are better. So this blue line are people with 760 FICO credit scores, which is a really good score. It's about as good as you can get. You can see how many people, the percentage of people that are buying houses have 760 scores compared to even 20 years ago. 20 years ago, look at this tranche of people that had really not very good FICO scores that were buying houses, and how this tranche has changed to where people with not very good FICO scores, very few are buying houses, and almost everyone has a great score that's buying. So because of that, no foreclosures. People are making their payments because we have people that are qualified to buy a house. Okay. Let's talk about equity in people's properties. There's about 11 to 12 trillion dollars of mortgage debt in the United States, but there's 43 trillion dollars of value in people's homes, which means there are over 30 trillion dollars in equity. Look at this number compared to just the 1990s, how that number has grown like massively. Okay, there's all this pent up equity. There's all these people that could sell their houses and move up and buy a bigger house because they have tons and tons of equity, but they're frightened by the interest rate game. They're frightened by, what am I going to trade up to? What am I going to change to? Why do I want to go buy the same house that's going to cost you more, or a little bit better house that's going to cost me $600 more a payment? Well, we'll show you why. Again, that way of thinking, you need to overcome that because of what's coming down the road. Why now is the time to buy? So there's tons and tons of equity out there. Again, this is about delinquencies, how people are delinquent. The green line is if someone's 30 days late on their mortgage payment, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, or more than that. You can see the serious delinquencies, the most we've ever seen happen during the housing crisis, housing recession back in 2010. Since then, again, because qualified mortgages, better FICO scores, very small delinquencies, and this is the lowest we've ever seen, sub 3%, 2%, that's virtually zero, right? If you're an investor in mortgage-backed securities, you would view this as 0, 2% and below is 0. There are no delinquencies, right? No one, our people are qualified, they're buying houses, they're keeping them. But the first-time home buyer, they're getting locked out, right? They're struggling. They're the ones that are struggling the most in this market. Let's talk to you why. Here's the median house price right now, and this is in the country, not in Utah. Utah's a little bit higher. Okay, median house price, this is what it was 5 years ago, excuse me, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The housing peak bubble was in 2005 when we had we had the most home sales activity ever when we had 4 million homes for sale. I showed that graph, there's 4 million homes for sale back then. Because everyone was buying and selling, everyone had to get one. They were FOMO, fear of missing out, so everyone was buying houses they didn't know they shouldn't. So we're above that peak ever, and we're above what it was when the housing recession happened. Here's what people's mortgage balance is. Here's their average interest rate. Here's what their average monthly payment is right now. And here's what their income is. Incomes have gone up substantially over the last 10 to 15 years. And people are spending 34% of their gross income on their housing payment. A year ago it was 23%, 5 years ago is 23, 10 was 19, but during the housing hike, it was 41%. So we're below the housing hike. So people, that's a lot. I mean, we try to keep people below 50% of their housing payment to qualify. This is higher than it's been, but it's not a crazy number, right? If you're spending 30% of your gross monthly income on your housing payment, you should be able to afford a house in the current price, assuming you're not going crazy on everything else you're spending.
These are national numbers. What, do you know what it is here? Because it's,
Yeah,
it is higher here, isn't it?
Utah prices are a little bit higher here. This number is probably anywhere from 3 to 5% higher in Utah, because we're a top 5 housing price state, believe it or not. We're one of the 5 highest, most expensive states in the country to buy in, outside of New York, California, Illinois. I can't remember, just came out a couple months ago. We're a top 5 state of cost. Washington, the average home price is the highest here in almost any state. It's expensive. So, but wages are a little bit higher here. They're good. Unemployment, we're number 1 or 2 in unemployment rate, so jobs are plentiful. And so this is probably 35 to 40%. We try to keep people below 50. 42 is kind of a number we use a lot, but you can go up to 50% a lot of the time. But the bottom line is people should be able to qualify, because this is a number that historically shows you should have no problem making a house payment if your housing payment is 30 to 40% of your gross monthly income. So while it is higher than in the past, it's not the highest it's been. People just need to get, again, a new normal. What's the new normal? I've got to be able to afford this. I maybe have to make some changes in the cars I'm buying and what I'm spending and other things that I'm doing in my life. Okay, this is where the meat of the presentation comes into, and why you need to understand there is this massive tidal wave of purchases that are coming here in the next 24 to 60 months. These are 2 graphs. This is the exact same graph. It's just colored differently. This is based off of the population of the United States. Okay, this is these are the baby boomers. This is age, how old someone is, and how many millions of people are in that age bracket. So if I'm 52 years old, there's over 4 million people that are my age. Okay, if I'm 24 years old, there's 4 million people that are my age. If I'm 96 years old, there's only 200,000 people my age. Does that make sense? And then it's broken out by what we categorize those age brackets: baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, etc. Does that make sense? And I'm highlighting millennials right here, which is also highlighted there in the yellow. I'm going to show you a bigger graph, but that's what this is showing. There are more millennials than anybody else right now. They're exceeding the baby boomers, because the baby boomers, which were the biggest population for the last 70, 80 years, they're dying. And so the millennials are the largest segment of our population. And why is that important? Let's pull this up. So here's this graph, just bigger. And it shows the biggest segments, again, is millennials, and they're between 25 and 35 right now, and they will be for the next 10 years. They're gonna be this biggest cohort of people. That 10-year gap segment of people are the biggest segment of the population they're going to be for the next 10 years. You see that? Does that make sense? Okay, so these 25-year-olds in 10 years will be 35, but this just gets moved over. They're still the biggest segment of our population. Okay, why is that important? Why the millennials so important? This is why it's so important. Here's the same graph over here. This shows the percentage of home ownership by your age. Okay, if you're over 65 years old in this country, 80% of the population 65 and older own a house. Okay, if you're 55 to 65, 75 to 80% of the population own a house. If you're over 35, 70% of the population, a little less than 65% of the population own a house. Does that make sense? If you're under 35, only 40% of the population owns a house. This is kind of this magic window, if you're following me. Why does the home ownership from the age of 25 to 35 go almost double from I'm under 35 to when I'm over 35? The home ownership population almost doubles in that segment. And this has always been the case. This is not just now. This has always been historical information. Home ownership rates go when someone's 35, if they're over 35, the home ownership rate doubles than if they're under 35. Why? I mean, there should be. Why do you think that's the case? What happens in that when you're 25 to 35 years of age in your life? What's going on?
Kids,
Kids,
better job.
family, better job, established career. You need a house. Yeah, you're buying a house. It's the biggest segment of our population, and they have not been buying because they grew up in a sub 5% culture. Since the year 2000, since they knew they existed and knew that they were alive, and they even knew anything about rates, rates were always sub 5%, sub 4%, sub 3%. They've never seen a 7% rate. And so they are just sitting on the sidelines waiting. And there is this massive tens and tens of millions of people that are waiting to buy, that are just aching to buy. And it's not going to take much of a nudge for them to start buying and coming in droves. Okay, in droves. And when that happens, you're going to see what happens when you have this massive demand that's not ready to buy with not a ton of supply. Prices are going up. Okay, they are not going to come down. I don't care what rates are doing, and rates will come down. Prices are not going to come down. I mean, they come down 5% or 2%, they go up 5%, or they are not going to come down. So if you have a consumer on the side saying, well, I want to wait, I'm going to wait until prices come down. You can tell them, dude, that's not happening. Number one, that is not happening. Well, I want to wait for rates to come down because then I'll have more purchasing power. You can do that, but guess what? The other tens upon tens of millions of people are doing the same thing. And so what happens when everyone comes to the market today? You know, the average home price in Utah is about, give or take, 550, right? And let's say it's a 7%. The average loan amount on that 550 is $400,000. That's a better number. So the average loan amount in Utah is about $400,000. At 7%, your principal and interest payment is about $2,600. Okay, not the taxes and interest, just the principal and interest payment. It's about $2,600 at 7%. Now we can mitigate that by doing buy downs right now. You all know what a buy down is? Buy downs, you get the sellers to. Sellers are motivated right now. They are motivated to pay, right? They're motivated to move their property because it's a buyer's market. And right now, I can get a seller to pay closing costs or dollars to buy a rate down to, instead of 7%, I can get it 1 to 2% lower, 5 or 6% or 5%. Every percent my rate drops at a $400,000 loan amount, my payment drops by about $250 a month.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can get my rate over the next couple of years 1 to 2%, sometimes even 3%. There's a 3% buy down, lower than what they are now, which I'm fine with, because what's going to happen with rates in the next 2 years? Going down. And what am I going to do when that happens? Refinance, right? So yeah, I'll buy a house right now at 7% rate because I'm not going to pay 7. I'm going to get the sellers to do a buy down and get my rate at 6 or 5%, which is a good rate. It's going to lower my payment $250 to $500 a month. I'm going to have that house for the next couple of years, and when rates drop, I'm going to refinance into the current 4 to 5% rate anyway. And then what happened during that year or two that I did that, rather than not buying, what happens to the equity in my house over the next year or two? Goes through the roof.
Yeah.
Through the roof. right? I'm gonna gain 10+% is the projection in Utah over the next 2 to 3 years, a year because of this demand issue. So why would I sit on the sideline? Because I think that home prices are gonna go down. No, they're gonna go up. And if rates come down a little bit, yeah, they're gonna go up, but I'm gonna lose all my purchasing power because the prices are just 10% higher. So I didn't gain anything by waiting.
Yeah.
In fact, and I lost tens of thousands of dollars in equity by waiting. So this is a backwards way of thinking. We got to teach people, no, by waiting, it's costing you money. What do you mean? It's a 7% interest rate. How's it costing you money? We'll get you a lower rate. But if you don't buy now over the next 12 months, we are on this tidal wave precipice of all these millennials that simply can't wait anymore. And it doesn't matter what rates are doing, they're going to start buying. And when people start buying, prices are going to go
Yeah,
up.
and it's just a good question to ask your client, that what happens when the rates come down? Who wants to buy? Everybody wants to buy. And what happens when there's high demand? Prices go up.
Prices
So
go
do you
up.
think that you're gonna get a good deal? It's just good to ask them that confronting question.
Sellers won't be willing to pay
Yeah.
closing costs. You're gonna have, I mean, how, if you were a buyer during the COVID years, it was a nightmare, right? 10, 20, 30, $50,000 above asking until some people finally just gave up, said, I'm done.
Yeah.
It's too stressful. I don't want to do it anymore, right? You're not dealing with that right now. You're motivated sellers that will budge on price and pay closing costs in 12 to 24 months. If I'm a seller, it's like, here's my price, take it or leave it. I'm gonna take the highest bid. I'm not paying any closing costs. And it's gonna be a bidding war because this segment of population is coming out of the woodwork in droves and they're gonna start buying. And all it will take is a little tick in rates. I mean, rates come down 0.5%. If now there's a 6 in front of the number instead of a 7, and now people start buying. Once we get into the 5s, hold on to your butts, right? I mean, it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be the biggest purchase years over the next decade this country has ever seen, because we've never seen numbers like this. It's a perfect storm. We've never seen so many people wanting to buy that are on the sideline, so much pent up demand with very little supply, and a market where rates come down a little bit, boom, everyone's coming into the market. Yeah.
But even something to tell sellers is that if you bought a house in the last like 4 years and before that, you still have a ton of equity.
You're sitting on tons of equity, so why not move up? Say this for the first time home, this discussion is for the first time home buyer, but also the move up buyer. I got a 3.5% rate, I don't want to give it up. Really? You don't want to give it up? What's going to happen? Why not buy up now and get a better home that's going to appreciate even more over the next 2 to 3 years? And then you're in the house that you want and you got it for a fraction of the cost, because you wait 2 years. Your $600,000 house that you wanted to move up to now, maybe $700,000 in a year when you wait, or 2 years. And you didn't, and you lost all that equity you could have gained by buying today. It's the same discussion because they do have equity, and they may have, and we can mitigate their payment. They may not have a 3.5% rate. We can get them a 5% rate, right? As a buyer, if I need to move up and get a bigger house, I'm probably okay paying 5% versus 7% if my rate right now is 3.5%. I can swallow that, right, a little bit more, knowing that I'm gonna refinance anyway, because we know, and we know rates are coming down. The data shows it. We're not guessing here. It's happened for the last 100 years. It's the same cycle that can continue. Okay, let's look at this. OPM talks about, this is just news, not news to you, other people's money, right? $400,000 purchase price. I put 10% down. That's $40,000. Let's just say my house appreciates 2% a year. It means it went up $8,000. That's not an $8,000 appreciation. That's a $20,000 return on my investment, right? If I put $40,000 down on a house and the value went up $8,000, that's a 20% return on my money. People focus on what kind of return do I get on the value of my house. Focus on the return you get on the down payment you put. That's what your rate of return is, not on the equity. Yeah, the equity went up, but based on how much I put down on a small increase in appreciation, I got a 20% return on my money because of the amount that it went up, only 2%, right? Mortgage interest deduction, right? I did this before rates went to 7. Here's an average loan amount. Here's the principal and interest payment. Here's the interest deduction. The average tax bracket person, they're going to save almost $7,000, $500 a month in tax savings from an average person. There's no such thing, there's no bigger tax deduction, as we all know, than your mortgage interest deduction. So tax savings versus renting versus keeping the house they have now. Capital gains, huge capital gains. I can make up to $250,000 as an individual, $500,000 as a couple. My amortization over the next 5 years, my principal balance is going to go down $23,000. It's still the best investment of creating wealth that you can make. We don't marry the rate, we marry the house, we date the rate, right? Heard that expression before. This is the biggest, best chart I can show for why people need to be buying and moving up and not sitting on the sideline. This has to do with wealth, with your net worth. The gold line represents borrowers in different classes. This is unfortunate what it shows, but it is what it is. People that own versus people that non-homeowners that are renters. So, and it's a indication of issues we have in the country with Black, Hispanic, Asians and whites do much better than those other races, but all races together, if I own, this is my net worth versus if I rent, this is my net worth. Right? This is combining of the two of all households, renting and owning. So why do you want to buy? Why are you waiting? Quit worrying about the rate. Now, whether I can afford a house is a real thing. And there may be some first-time home buyers that they're going to have to make some big changes to be able to just enter the market in the first place. And we need to see more supply that's bringing in more affordable housing and more opportunities to get people to buy. But if you have if you're a wage worker at hourly worker at a restaurant, it's going to be tough for you to buy a house in Utah. It just is. But if you're 80% of the population has a salaried wage, is a decent wage, an average wage, which is like $50,000 to $80,000 a year, you should be able to buy in this market if you get all your ducks in a row. And the wealth gap, if you don't, is tremendous. This is going to be in this next generation too. This is going to be the big differentiator between those that are wealthy and those that are not wealthy. And the term wealthy that we use, whatever that means, but it's going to mean do you own property or not. Doesn't matter how much money you make. Doesn't matter where you live. It's if you own property or not. Right now, about 65% of the population owns houses, as we showed on the previous graph. We want that to continue to increase, but people need to be buying houses to help create that wealth. So you guys are the difference makers. You're the ones that can educate and teach your borrowers why sitting on the sideline makes no financial sense. Again, no emotion, right? The numbers are what they are. The data is what it is. We know what's happening. We know what's coming down the line. We're not making it up 100 years of data show this. The market's going to continue to remain slow, kind of like it is for probably the rest of the year, but it gives you an opportunity to tell people, what if you find 5 people in the next 3 or 4 months to buy a house that weren't going to buy a house normally? And you say, trust me, you buy a house now, you're going to come kissing my feet in 12 to 24 months that you did.
Yeah.
And they will.
It's true.
Because they're going to see how much appreciation they made. That holy cow, if I hadn't bought when I bought, the house that I wanted would have been out of reach and I would have lost out on all that equity. Now I've got all this extra, tens of thousands of extra equity that I wouldn't have had in the house that I wanted. We need to build more homes. This is something that neither you or I can control. Just like we can't control rates, we can't control how much homes are built. Rates are, that's just probable, but rates are going to drop. The Fed is, they're gonna make it happen. I don't care what the Fed funds rate, they're gonna do something, whether it's driving the Fed rates up super fast or slowly, that's gonna eventually cause a little bit of a recession, new unemployment numbers to go up, and we're gonna see rates drop. Demographics and supply, that's not changing. This winter, we all know the best time for buyers to buy typically is fall to spring, right? When not many people are out buying. And that's going to even be more the case this year, as you saw those new listing numbers are not getting any better, and they're not going to get better. The next 6 to 9 months, oh my gosh, if I was an agent, I would just be pounding people to death and hammering this message home instead of, I'm going to wait till next spring. Yeah, you and everybody else are waiting till next spring, and then you lost all your advantage. This is why you need to buy now. Sellers are motivated. I can get the interest rate lower. We know rates are going to drop, so you're going to refinance. I'm losing out on all this equity if I don't buy right now, because we have the biggest wave of people ready to buy homes that we've ever had in the history of the United States. We're going to start buying here in the next 12 to 60 months. Why would you want to compete with them? Right? Why would you want to? Now you're going to have buyers that are still going to wait, and that's fine. And you got to deal with that. You got to deal with the craziness of multiple offers. But I would try to get as many people in it right now as you possibly could, because they're going to be massive, massive winners. All of the big economic leaders in this country, and I sit on all kinds of forums, podcasts, I don't care who they are, presidents and owners of banks, Fed chairmen, industrialist capitalists, they are all pushing their kids and their grandkids, anyone they know, to buy. Buy. This is a once probably in a lifetime opportunity for you to see such a massive increase in what your equity can do because of the demographics. Demographics don't lie. They are what they are. And they're pushing everyone to buy. Warren Buffett says, buy when everyone else is scared and stay away when everyone else is frenzied and can't get enough. And right now, everyone's scared. Everyone's scared of the housing market. It's slowing down. This is the time to buy. We know people are still going to buy when it's a frenzy because that's just the nature of their people are hurt. They just follow everybody else. But this is what we can do to make a difference to help your clients and to help people get off the fence. You're not going to spend an hour talking with them, but you can get a few bullet points. And I'm happy to share this presentation with anyone. Just shoot me an email. I'll send it to you. But you want to share this information with as many people as you can to help them understand why buying is so critical right now to their overall financial wealth if they want to take advantage of it. Right. And that's your job to kind of help them do that. Any questions about the things we've talked about? It's a lot of data. It's a lot of information. I'm cotton mouth, which means I've talked too much. But do you have any questions about anything we've gone over? Anything we need to review? Anything that I went too fast on? Is it making sense?
Yes.
I think it made sense. Yeah, it's good information, good talking points.
Good. Well, I think we're at the hour mark, so I don't want to keep you longer. Yeah.
So when you do talk about a recession, like, cause that's the word people hear and,
Mhm.
you know, they're expecting everything to just
Yeah.
tank, like what are they predicting the recession to look like?
So very mild. So again, recession means GDP, gross domestic product. We're not producing enough. We're not generating more income than what we're spending as a country for goods and services. And typically we have a positive GDP. We grow at 3 to 5% a year. We're always producing more than what we're spending and making. The term recession means we have one quarter where GDP is negative. So we're not producing as much as what we're spending and buying and stuff. That's what a recession is. So it doesn't really matter if it's a massive recession where it's trillions of dollars or again, whether it's $1 negative. So a minor recession is fine. We always go through them. It's just part of financial 101. The market's always doing this. And this is so the nature of the beast. And so to drive it down there, it depends on what the Fed does. I mean, it could get a little bit ugly if the Fed gets super hyper aggressive and says, okay, we're just done with this. We're just going to raise the Fed funds rate 3%. That will like slow things down overnight. You'll have unemployment probably double. Unemployment claims will triple or quadruple. It won't be good for the economy, but it will be fantastic for rates. It will be amazing for mortgage rates and the housing market. During the housing recession during 08 to 2010, which everyone was concerned that was the next big depression, the mortgage market grew faster than it's ever grown before because rates were dropping and people refinancing, taking advantage of all these opportunities. So the prediction is the economy is so strong that the Fed can't make it go crazy, but they want it to go a little bit. And when that does, they think it's going to happen here in the next 6 to 12 months, and it will just be a little bit of a lag, and it will bounce back pretty quickly because rates will be coming down. So people it's not going to impact average Joe. I mean, we've experienced a recession in the housing market, haven't we? The last 18 months, everything slowed down. It's not like it was. The rest of the economy hasn't experienced anything like that. The recession has been the tech sector, services, goods and services, manufacturing, they're all growing. So now the housing market's a big part of the economy and it employs millions of people. But if you're not in the housing market, if you're not a realtor, a mortgage, a title, whatever, appraiser, you haven't felt what we felt the last 18 months. Everyone else is doing great. So they'll start to feel it a little bit, but not like we have. And it's going to benefit us. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks, guys. Pleasure to be with you.
Okay, appreciate it. Good. Okay, see you guys. Yeah, Mark.
Hey, Nick, how are you?
Good.
Post on something.
Have a good floor?
Yeah.
You say, well.
Pretty
you
low
know,
key.
we're
I
gonna
usually
use that money,
pretty
so
busy,
give
but
you
we
10,000,
have a lot.
You're gonna use a little bit
It's
of it.
kind of nice.